Everyone, welcome to the Very Vibrant Makeup channel. So today, as you can see, I already have my look on. We are going to dive into the Rust palette. So this is a new palette from Melt Cosmetics. It's a very beautiful palette. I've been wanting to get into this one for quite some time. So here's what it looks like. I love the packaging because the packaging has a little bit more of like this eroded type of texture to it. And shine, and then the rust letters are very pretty, and then you open it, it's built just like the other palettes. It's the same size as every other palette, like the Gemini, the Millennial Pinx, and the Vita palette. I would say I'm looking at my palettes right now, I would say the Radioactive is a little bit smaller and shorter, but this one has a lot of tones that are really warm in it. They've got yellow, they've got coppers, and then they have deep browns. So we're going to go ahead and swatch this guy with no primer. And from the touch, they are very, very soft. Melt Cosmetics is known to have very, very soft shadows. So this first shade is Classic. And you all know that I do like a nice vanilla shade. So this one is a beautiful, like, yellowish vanilla. I would say it's more like a custard color. Antique, which is like a peach, almost like a yellow peach. It looks more peach in the pan. Erode, which is a mustard yellow matte. So these three are mattes. Rubbish, which is a more like yellow toned camel color, if that makes sense. Like a nice transition color, I would say, that has just a little bit more yellow tones in it. Next 4. So there you go. As you can see, the shimmers do have quite a bit of fallout, so you might experience that. Let's see. This one is Tarnish. It's a real pretty gold, almost like a coppery gold, not a true gold, not a yellow gold. And then this one is Rust, and that is a warm brown. Redox, I don't know. This one has a lot of like fallout. And that one's a nice coppery brown. Mar, which is a dark, not too dark of a brown, but it's a nice warm toned medium to dark brown. And then the last 2 shades are going to be Ravage, which reminds me of a color in the Heat palette, but it doesn't have an orange shift to it like that one does. I think I can't remember the color. And then the last one is Rot 2. And that one's the dark brown. So there are the swatches for the Rust palette. So I feel like this palette is very similar to the Heat and the Honey palette, because it has those yellow tones, but it also has those copper tones. But they threw in those darker, deeper tones to really add some dimension to the eye. So if you like stuff like this, if you like the Honey palette or even the Heat palette, but you need a little bit more depth, I would definitely pick this up. So we're going to get into a look and how I created this look today, and 2 different ways of priming, or not priming, but applying. So I did prime with, I had a sample of my 24-hour primer from Smashbox, which was highly recommended by one of my artists in my counter. So I definitely do want to do an old method, which required me to put my primer and then set the primer and then go on with the transition shades and then build the depth. And then my new way, which is more of, I do usually do a hydrating primer, but I was going to keep to the same primer. But this one is pretty hydrating. But I'll start with the dark colors, and then I will start diffusing it with the light colors. So it's kind of like a reverse. So we're going to do 2 different methods on applying the same look. So So first we're going to prime, and I'm using the Smashbox 24-hour primer. We're going to do, I'll prime the other eye while I'm at it. Okay, so we're going to get into the palette. Definitely do want to dive in. I'm going to use my little Lavish tapered brush, and we're going to go into Classic. I'm going to do an old technique that I used to do, which was set my primer. So we are going to place Classic all over the lid. And just start off with a blank base here. We're going to do the new method that I do, which is get darker colors first and then build. See which one works. So we're going to do Rot 2, so the darkest color in the palette. We're going to use the Lavish eye shading brush. Oops, wrong eye. And we're going to start off with a darker color on the outside. So I'm going to do two different techniques using this palette. So I like to see what the palette can do. So just kind of softly kind of blend that a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect. Alright, so then the other eye we're going to go back to building. So we're going to be doing Antique, which is this shade right here. Using the same blender brush. And we're going to go ahead and put that into the crease. So this is a technique I used to use. Just because my eyes were so oily, I had to set my primer. Now I'm getting a little older, it's not the case. So we'll see how this turns out. We're just kind of putting Antique all over there. And then we'll go back with the other eye, and we're going to get a different shading brush. If I can find one. We're going to use this Luxie 121, and we're going to go into Mar, which is this shade right there. It's the next matte that's a little bit lighter than Rot. We're going to place that right on the edge there and just blend it into Rot. I don't know if it's Rot or Rot, I have no idea. And this palette has some top marks, so far pigmentation's pretty good. Okay, then we're going to go back onto the other eye, and I'm going to place Rubbish, which is this shade right here. I'm going to skip the yellow because I'm just trying to deepen the crease. We're just kind of softly going back and forth, blending out those edges. We'll go back into Antique and blend those edges out. And then of course back into Classic, which was the beginning shade. Put it on the brow bone. Okay, then we're going to go back into the other eye, and we're going to use the shade Rust, which is the next one up. Kind of working backwards, if that makes sense. And with this technique, I kind of blow out my crease just a little higher. This one didn't do too much at blending because it was a little dark. But this is kind of diffusing that dark shade a little bit more. Okay, then we're going to go into, going back to the other eye, we're going to go into the Rust shades. We're meeting right in the middle now. I'm going to take that blending brush and we're going to apply it. Kind of dig in my old technique on this palette. So we're just taking it higher so that we can kind of match what we've done there. Rust is a little harder to blend, but not too bad. Okay, we're going to go back into Rubbish and blow that higher. And then Antique to diffuse, and Classic to really lighten up that area. Just like that. So yeah, this one looks very choppy, and this one is looking a lot more blended. So technique wise, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start using the same brush that I used on this eye now. So we're going to go into Rubbish, which is that shade that we used to blend this out a little more, and we're going to use this to kind of soften this brown on this side. And I blew my crease a little too high, but that's okay, we can always diffuse it down. And Rubbish is going to do that for me. So I'm just kind of taking Rubbish and just putting it all over my lid and my brow bone area so I can blend everything together. So it kind of has a little bit more of a softer look to it. I'm going to go in with Antique and diffuse some more. And then Classic to place into the brow bone and really diffuse it. I did notice that this is looking a little choppy still, so I'm going to go back into Rust and just kind of build it back a little bit. Go into Raw a little bit more to bring back that shade. That looks a lot better. Don't worry about it being messy on the outer corner. Okay, so now back onto this eye, we're going to go the other way. We're going to go into Mar, now that we have to use Rust. And we're going to build Mar on the outer corner using the Luxie 121 brush. Because we're trying to mimic what we did there on the other side, just using different methods. Alright, you can already see it's starting to get a little choppy, but that's okay. We'll go back into Rust and smooth that out. Okay, then we're going to go into Rot, darker shade. I kind of worked backwards, if that makes sense. And we're going to build Rot up. See, I'm liking this eye better than this eye. They're looking pretty similar now, just a little bit choppier on this side. So we'll kind of fix that a little bit. So we'll go back into Rust and make sure everything's blended. Alright, and then we're going to just go back into Rubbish, which was that shade that kind of dialed it down just a smidge. And then we'll go back into Classic to build back that brow bone. So it softens it just a smidge, but we'll just kind of bring up those colors a little bit more. Okay, so that looks pretty good so far. Alright, so now that we have both of them pretty similar, I think it's just the lighting. It's just blown a little bit higher on this side, but that's okay. We'll just kind of blend those a little bit better. Okay, so now we're going to go into the foiled shades. So I'm going to take Redo, which is this shade right here. It's kind of like a rose gold. We're going to put this on the lid. So I'm going to put my new method with the sponge applicator, or not sponge, but the silicone applicator from Smashbox. And then we're going to put with my finger on the other side. How I used to do it. And sometimes I still do. Okay, so we've got that rose gold shade down, so now we're going to go back into Rot, the darkest shade, and just fluff it in there to transition the shades. Looks a lot deeper on this side than it does this side. Right, so we're going to do the lower lash line pretty much the same, like I always do. So we're going to take, I kind of want to do a different shade. I want to do Ravage, which is this darker shimmer. And we are going to take a smudge brush from the Lavish. It's a pencil brush. So we're going to dip into Ravage. And we're just going to place this on the lower lash line. It's a really nice chocolate color. And then we'll blend that out. I'm going to use Erode because I really want to use every shade in this palette. So Erode is the yellow one. I do need to kind of fix these areas a little bit. They seem a little bit too choppy. But that could come with just putting more foundation. Okay, so now we're going to use, there is no bright shade in here, so we're going to use Tarnish, the last shade I haven't touched. This one right here on the inner corner. So I'm going to use my finger for the one I did the old way, and then the new way I'm going to use a tool. So that actually does work in the inner corner. Use my finger. It's really nice. And then I'll use a tool. So I'll take up the Lavish tool, which will fit perfectly in my inner corner, take up Tarnish, and just apply it. And just kind of wisp away some excess. So that is the completed look. I did really like foundation because I haven't been feeling like wearing a lot. but I really, really do like this palette. It's actually really, really pretty. Trying to figure out if I want more mascara. I kind of like this. A little bit more mascara. Just a tiny bit. So anyways, so the formula is really, really creamy. It's very pigmented. As you can see, the difference between both methods is that this one's just blown a little bit higher. So I definitely don't mind doing my old method again. I feel like, though, that this is dulled, the old method. My shimmers aren't as popped as using the tool from Smashbox, so I feel like that really popped it, and this side's a little bit deeper than this side. So if I want it softer, I'd probably do my old method. If I want it a little bit deeper, then I'd probably do my new method in doing that. So I really do like this palette. It's very pretty. So yeah, overall thoughts on the Rust palette from Melt Cosmetics is that it's very, very versatile. It almost reminds me a little bit of the Heat palette with more depth. So if you don't know the Heat palette from Urban Decay, it is a kind of like copper tone type of palette, which helps kind of get that warm tone happening, you know what I mean? Like the warmth, the coppers. It's very, very extremely warm. I used to have that palette, but I don't anymore because I just didn't find myself using it that much. And I feel like the Naked palettes from Urban Decay do not work on me. I did like the Naked 3 when I first got into like the higher end makeup. The Naked 3 palette was really, really, really pretty and very nice. It was soft, but then I started getting a little bit more into like deeper tones. But this one is definitely like the Heat palette with more yellow tones and deeper tones in it. So do I highly recommend this palette? Absolutely. Melt Cosmetics has not disappointed me at all. I feel like they have done everything that they needed to do to make really good palettes. Making a mess here. I definitely, let's see, let's pick up my other palettes. So I have used the Gemini palette, and I really, really love the Gemini palette. That's probably one of my favorite palettes because it has those green tones, and I love olive tones in it. The Millennial Pinx, I did do a video on trying to save it from bad reviews. So I did a look on that, doing two different types of methods. I like to use two different methods so that you can see different options that work for you. It might not necessarily work for you doing it one way, so I do it two ways just to give you more options. But the Millennial Pinx is probably a lot more difficult to use versus the Rust. Now, the Impulsive palette, I think I did some videos on that too. These ones are very versatile, very easy to use, very creamy. Same with the Radioactive palette. It's more vivid, so there's not going to be any neutral tones in there, but they do blend very nicely. And then, of course, I did do a video on the Smoke Obsessions palette. So this one is actually one of my favorites. So I really do like Smoke Obsessions. And then, of course, I haven't dabbled quite... Have I dabbled in this? I haven't dabbled in this one yet on camera. So the Muerte and the Vita palette from their Christmas collection. Ooh. I'm getting powder all over me. Hopefully none broke. No, everything's fine. So these ones are palettes that I want to kind of play with a little bit more. But as far as like a neutral palette, a neutral warm palette, I would say the Rust has exactly what you need. Very warm, very neutral. So definitely if you want something a little bit more on the deeper side, but you like, here's a great way to think about this. It's a cross between the Honey palette and the Heat palette, if that makes sense. So it's got the yellow tones, it's got, I know the Honey palette doesn't have a deep, deep tone, and I know that the Heat doesn't have too deep of tones. So it does add a little bit more tones to it. I don't even think I have anything similar to this one. I really don't have any palettes that are quite the same. I was going to compare it to my Prelude palette from Lime Crime, but it's no comparison at all. The Lime Crime is more neutral and not warm. So, but it has those brown tones. Alright, so, oh, here's another one I can compare it to, because I did like the Warriors palette from Juvia's Place. So I have the Warriors palette. This one can be compared to this one a little bit better. It's just this one has more rose gold tones in it. This one has more yellow gold tones in it. But this one is actually, I feel like this one is close to the Honey palette, just a darker tone to help kind of deepen everything else and not make it look washed out. Because on me, the Honey palette looks very washed out on me. Usually that's the palette I pull if like I interview people. So that they can do like a look on me, because that one is very difficult for my skin tone to pull off, and if they're able to make it look really nice on me, I know that they have a little bit more versatility in sense to kind of deepen the eyes and make the look work. So definitely do like the Rust palette if you haven't picked it up already. It is available on the Sephora website. I believe it's $58. So this one's a very, very nice palette. I love Melt Cosmetics. It's one of my favorite brands. So yeah, that's the end of this video. I hope you guys got a little bit more information on the Rust palette. It has very high reviews, so I really don't have anything bad to say about it, just from using it at first. I like the blend. It was easy to use, very pretty. I might do another look on this later on, but I will be doing some looks. I have a request from one of my subscribers to do a certain look, so I'm probably going to film that next. Alright, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.